When the British withdrew from India in 1947, they left behind a fragmented subcontinent rather than a unified nation. Nearly 40% of the land comprised of princely states, semi-sovereign entities neither part of British India nor directly ruled by the British Crown. Under a policy of indirect rule, these states enjoyed varying degrees of autonomy, their relations with the British regulated by individual treaties. The princely states operated under the doctrine of paramountcy, which asserted the Crown's supremacy in foreign policy and defense, while allowing them varying degrees of autonomy in internal affairs. Governed by individual treaties, this arrangement created a complex mosaic where some states enjoyed near-complete self-governance, while others were subject to significant external control. As India and Pakistan approached independence, the British announced that paramountcy would lapse, effectively dissolving the treaties that had bound the princely states to the Crown. This left the rulers with a critical choice: accede to one of the new dominions or declare independence. The prospect of numerous sovereign entities emerging across the subcontinent threatened the unity and stability of the region, a potential balkanization of India, undermining its hard-won freedom. Amid this uncertainty, some rulers sought to assert their autonomy. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the founder of Pakistan, aimed to leverage the princely states as pawns in his negotiations with the Indian National Congress. He offered the princes a blank check to list any concessions they desired in exchange for joining Pakistan, seeing these states as bargaining chips that could enhance Pakistan's position and influence. The Nizam of Hyderabad and the Nawab of Bhopal, for instance, entertained notions of independence or joining Pakistan, despite geographic impracticalities and predominantly Hindu populations. The monumental task of integrating over 550 princely states into the Union of India fell to Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, the nation's first Home Minister, and his secretary, V.P. Menon. In this video, we explore how Patel skillfully accomplished this historic unification, creating a cohesive India and setting the stage for its future as an independent republic. Sardar Patel approached the integration of India's princely states with a combination of diplomacy, pragmatism, and determination. He offered the princes assurances such as the continuation of privileges to ease their transition. Through persuasive negotiation, tactful cajoling, and, when necessary, firm coercion, as in the cases of Junagadh, Hyderabad, and Kashmir, Patel successfully secured the accession of the princely states. Two key documents facilitated this process: the Standstill Agreement and the Instrument of Accession. The Standstill Agreement confirmed the continuation of pre-existing agreements and administrative practices between the princely states and the British government. The Instrument of Accession, on the other hand, was a formal transfer of sovereignty to India in matters of defense, external affairs, and communication. Some rulers attempted to delay full integration by signing only the Standstill Agreement, which would have allowed them a bilateral treaty with India while retaining control over their own defense and foreign policy, essentially a step toward independence. In response, the Indian government firmly required that only states signing both the Standstill Agreement and the Instrument of Accession would be accepted, thereby securing India's authority. By August 15, 1947, Indian Independence Day, nearly all of the princely states, some 560 in total, had signed both documents. Following the British precedent of offering generous pensions to deposed rulers, the Government of India provided allowances called privy purses that would persist for their successors as well. Most negotiations centered around what privileges rulers would receive in return for signing away their sovereignty. Before integrating into the Indian Union, princely states often needed to be merged and reorganized, as was the case with Odisha. Patel employed a strategy of first securing the accession of smaller princely states with moderate administrative capabilities and less sophisticated governmental structures. These rulers were acutely aware that deteriorating law and order could lead to their overthrow, leaving them with nothing. Patel highlighted the risks of not joining India, emphasizing that continued unrest might result in the loss of their privileges and even their privy purses. In exchange for their cooperation, the government of India promised to protect their privileges, honor, and dignity. Recognizing that their authority depended on both the goodwill of their subjects and the support of the Indian government, 12 rulers agreed to the merger and signed the accord. The next phase involved negotiations with the Class A states, the largest and most developed, possessing well-organized administrations and financial stability. These rulers initially resisted, much to Patel's disappointment. When civil servants suggested supporting unrest in these provinces, Patel firmly opposed the idea, warning that sowing discord could lead to catastrophic consequences not only for the princely states but for the stability of newly independent India as a whole. Despite their reluctance, these rulers realized that remaining independent was impractical and that the risk of revolution was high. Ultimately, it was more prudent to accede to the government of India and secure generous privy purses. After persistent negotiations, an agreement was reached, incorporating 56,000 square miles of territory with a population of 8 million into the Union of India. Madhya Bharat was formed through the unification of 25 princely states, spanning 47,000 square miles across central India, with key states like Gwalior, Indore, and Malwa at its core. A major challenge was the political diversity among these states. Some, like Gwalior under Maharaja Jivajirao Scindia, were large, influential, and financially well-managed, making their leaders reluctant to relinquish control for a modest pension. Patel tailored his approach to win over such rulers, offering a larger privy purse and allowing Scindia to retain his title as Maharaja of Gwalior. Resistance was particularly strong from the Nawab of Bhopal, Hamidullah Khan, who initially sought independence or alignment with Pakistan, despite Bhopal's geographical distance and largely Hindu population. Ideologically opposed to the Indian National Congress, the Nawab was wary of losing his authority and privileges. Patel emphasized the risks of isolation and instability if Bhopal remained separate, warning that an uprising among Bhopal's Hindu population could leave the Nawab vulnerable to being overthrown by angry mobs demanding union with independent India. Confronted with these realities, the Nawab ultimately accepted a generous privy purse, titles, and status rather than risk such a fate. State by state, Patel employed a carrot-and-stick approach, offering privy purses and titles as incentives, while warning that rulers who resisted risked losing everything if overthrown by their own people. However, in cases like Junagadh and Hyderabad, Patel's strategy required a more forceful approach to secure their place in the Union. On August 15, 1947, the Nawab of Junagadh chose to accede to Pakistan, despite Junagadh's lack of contiguity, being 300 miles away by sea, and its 80% Hindu population. This decision disrupted Junagadh's economy, which relied on trade routes through Kathiawar and its integration into the Indian railway, postal and telegraph systems, straining commerce, industry and revenue. In response, the suzerain states of Mangrol and Babariawad declared independence and sought union with India. When Junagadh deployed troops to Babariawad, India moved a brigade to Kathiawar in reply. Pakistan supported the Nawab's decision, yet Junagadh's majority Hindu population contradicted the two-nation theory, which held that Muslims and Hindus should form separate nations, a concept that had driven partition. Amid this standoff, Hindu residents began fleeing, escalating tensions. India responded by cutting off fuel and coal supplies, severing air and postal links, and reoccupying Mangrol and Babariawad, which had already acceded to India. With no assistance from Pakistan, Sir Shah Nawaz Bhutto, the de facto leader of Junagadh and father of Pakistan's future leader Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, left for Karachi, effectively transferring Junagadh's administration to India. Assuming control, Sardar Patel visited Junagadh, addressing the public and ordering the restoration of the Prabhas Patan temple, desecrated centuries earlier by Mahmud Ghazni. A referendum held on February 20, 1948, saw Junagadh's people overwhelmingly vote to join India. Despite this, Pakistan continues to claim sovereignty over Junagadh to this day. Where Junagadh's people chose union through a vote, Hyderabad's integration would follow a far more contentious path. Hyderabad occupied a pivotal position in the heart of India, bordered by the central provinces to the north, Bombay to the west, and Madras to the east and south. As the premier princely state, it spanned 82,000 square miles, had a population of 16 million, and generated hundreds of millions of rupees in annual revenue. Despite 87% of its population being Hindu, the state was ruled by Nizam Osman Ali Khan, a Muslim, and its politics were dominated by Muslim elite. The influential pro-Nizam party, the Ittihadul Muslimin, insisted that Hyderabad remain independent, standing on equal footing with India and Pakistan. Reluctant to join either dominion, the Nizam proposed a treaty with India that would align Hyderabad's railways with Indian standards, contribute troops for India's defense, and ensure its external affairs conform to India's foreign policy, while maintaining neutrality in any conflict between India and Pakistan. Kasim Razvi, the leader of the Ittihadul Muslimin and a staunch advocate of Muslim supremacy, held significant sway over the Nizam. Razvi was determined to maintain Hyderabad's independence and the dominance of the Muslim elite. Recognizing the complexities of integrating Hyderabad, Patel granted the state a 3-month grace period after August 15th to decide on accession. Razvi traveled to Delhi to meet with Patel, who urged Hyderabad to hold a plebiscite to ascertain the will of its people. Razvi reacted angrily, asserting that the Hindus of Hyderabad were content under the Nizam's rule and warning that the final arbiter would be the sword if India pressed further. Initially, the Nizam's council voted to accept a draft agreement with India. However, the Ittihad-ul-Muslimin incited agitations, and large crowds besieged the homes of officials supporting accession. Razvi denounced the agreement as leading to Hyderabad's downfall, believing India was too preoccupied with the conflict in Kashmir to enforce accession. Disillusioned by the Nizam's alignment with Razvi, key members of the council resigned in protest, only strengthening Razvi's hand. Hinting at seeking support from Pakistan, the Nizam sent an envoy to Karachi. India, aiming for a peaceful resolution, signed a standstill agreement with Hyderabad, intending to use this time to bring the state closer into its orbit. However, the Nizam exploited this period to strengthen his position, hoping to build a case for independence. Shortly after signing the agreement, the Nizam's government took steps toward asserting independence from India by declaring Indian currency illegal, constructing new airfields, and granting Pakistan a loan of 200 million rupees. Meanwhile, Razvi organized the Razakars, a paramilitary force that fueled communal tensions through incendiary speeches and conducted raids into Indian territory. The Indian government demanded the disbandment of the Razakars, democratic reforms in Hyderabad's government, and limitations on its army. Hyderabad rejected these terms, and Razvi escalated his rhetoric, urging Muslims to march with the Quran in one hand and a sword in the other for Islamic supremacy. The Razakars intensified their activities, looting villages and attacking trains, creating an untenable law and order crisis. In response to the escalating violence and breakdown of order, the Indian government imposed an economic blockade and prepared for a military intervention. Operation Polo began on September 13, 1948, with a two-pronged advance by the Indian Army into Hyderabad. Despite initial resistance from the Hyderabad Army and the Razakars, the operation moved swiftly, leading to Hyderabad's formal surrender within 5 days of launching the operation. Recognizing the Nizam's prestige among Indian Muslims and his long-standing reign, the Indian government deemed it unwise to depose him, fearing it could unsettle the Muslim community. The Nizam acceded to India, disbanded the Razakars, and withdrew his complaint to the United Nations. With Hyderabad's integration, Patel's mission to unify India was nearly complete. With the integration of Hyderabad, the unification of India was nearly complete, except for Kashmir, which led to conflict with Pakistan and remains disputed and divided between the two nations to this day. The successful assimilation of the princely states profoundly impacted millions, transforming a fragmented land into a cohesive nation. While the payment of privy purses to former rulers was an ongoing expense until its abolition in 1971, The newly unified government inherited substantial assets. The administration of the integrated states brought in cash balances and investments worth billions of rupees. Much of this wealth had been accumulated by the princely states through investments in industries and ownership of properties like villages, jagiar lands, palaces, and fleets. The benefits of a united India far outweighed these costs. Patel called the integration a bloodless revolution affecting the destinies of millions of people. His efforts were not just about creating Indian states, but forging the nation-state of India. If you have enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe. I have been your host Albert. Until next time.